old wooden porch, while snow whipped against the tin roof like lashes from a whip, a tiny life dragged itself forward in despair. A Doberman puppy, no more than a month old, so thin his ribs jutted beneath wet fur, staggered with a torn burlap sack clenched tight in his mouth. He stopped at my doorstep, legs trembling, spent of all strength, and collapsed. From inside that sack, I saw something stir faintly. I opened it, and my heart broke. A white rabbit, gasping, its fur matted with blood, chest rising so faintly it seemed ready to stop at any moment. Pasted on the mouth of the sack was a crumpled scrap of paper, written in black marker, "Useless. Don't waste your time." In that instant, I knew. My audience, you, safe behind your screens, would have to stop and look straight into those eyes. The wet brown eyes of a puppy who wasn't pleading for himself, but for the dying friend he refused to abandon. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 60 years old, living alone on the outskirts of Missoula. I lost my husband 15 years ago to a sudden heart attack. 7 years ago, I lost my only son in a car accident. Since then, this house has been filled only with the wind and the ticking of the wall clock. I share it with two strays, Rusty and Pearl, aloof creatures who, in their quiet way, fill the spaces words cannot reach. That night, the wind howled, rattling the windows, hurling branches against the porch. At first, I thought the dragging sound outside was just another trick of the storm. But it didn't stop. Slow, heavy, like someone scratching straight through my chest. I threw on my old cardigan, opened the door, and the sight stole my breath. The tiny Doberman lay curled, breath ragged, ears drooping, still clutching the sack in his teeth as if letting go would mean losing the life inside forever. His eyes met mine, wet, trembling, yet fierce with determination. He didn't need words. I understood. When I loosened the sack, the porch light revealed the rabbit's bloodied white fur, its fragile breaths flickering. My throat closed. I remembered standing at my son's hospital bed, holding a hand growing colder by the minute, powerless to stop it. And now, this nameless puppy had dragged my world back into that same moment, the brink between life and death. I picked up the paper, my hands shaking, the words, "Useless. Don't waste your time," blurred beneath my fingers. My chest ached as though crushed in a vice. Someone had been cruel enough to beat them, abandon them, and then stamp that verdict onto a scrap of paper. Yet this puppy, barely a month old, his body failing, had carried that despair all the way to my door, as if the storm itself had delivered him to test my heart. I bent down and whispered, my voice trembling like a blood oath. "Little one, I will help you. I promise." Rusty poked his head out from inside, golden eyes gleaming. Pearl froze on the window ledge. I knew they understood. I gathered the puppy and the sack into my arms, his frail body trembling violently against me. He didn't whimper. He only turned his head toward the sack, making sure his friend was still there. I ran to my old pickup parked in the yard. Before shutting the door, I looked back at the porch, where for years there had been nothing but emptiness and shadows. Tonight, that place had echoed with the cry of life. And I knew this was the beginning of a battle, not only against the death closing in on these two fragile creatures, but against the cold cruelty of humankind. I set the torn sack on the passenger seat, holding tight to the limp white rabbit inside. Shadow, the Doberman pup, slumped across my lap, his frail body trembling as if he might shatter at any moment. I turned the key in my old pickup. The engine roared, coughing white smoke into the frozen night. Before me, the road stretched under heavy snow, blurred like a sea of fog. I knew every passing second drained another breath from that tiny chest. The wind howled against the windows. The wipers beat furiously, useless against the storm's thick fury. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, my eyes flicking again and again toward the sack. I could hear the rabbit's fragile breaths, faint, broken, like a candle sputtering before it dies. Shadow pressed his face into my lap, but his tearful eyes stayed locked on the sack, as if one blink might cost his friend's life. "Don't give up. Don't sleep," I whispered. Tears spilled before I could stop them. I had spoken those very words once before, by my son's hospital bed. That day, the ventilator screamed, the doctor shook his head, and I begged my boy to fight for one more minute. But he left, carrying my heart with him. And now here I was, in an old truck, screaming through a snowstorm, trying to keep alive a life the world had already written off as not worth saving. Old grief and present pain tore through me, sharp as glass. I looked at Shadow, small, broken, yet unyielding. He didn't understand death, but he understood love, and that alone made me feel less alone. Streetlights flickered past, faint streaks of yellow in the white blur. The tires slid on ice, nearly pitching us off the road. I slammed the brakes, my body lurching forward, heart hammering against my ribs. I clutched Shadow tighter, the sack thudding hard against the door. I pressed my palm against it, desperate for any warmth. Faint, but still there. "Hold on, Snowdrop. Don't leave me." The Montana night had no mercy, but I knew at the end of this road there was light. The clinic. I whispered Carter's name, the only man I trusted. He had saved a stray cat crushed beneath a car last year, and that cat still lived. If anyone could work a miracle, it was Carter. Every mile stretched into a century. I drove and prayed, "Lord, please give this rabbit a chance. Don't let Shadow watch his friend die in front of him." My hands shook, but I never loosened my grip on the wheel. Some moments in life don't allow weakness. This was one of them. When the clinic's small building finally emerged through the storm, I broke down, sobbing. Its windows glowed with weak yellow light. I braked hard, the truck skidding several feet before stopping. I gathered Shadow and the sack, sprinted across the ice-slick lot, shoes soaking, slipping, sliding. With my fist, I pounded the door, my voice cracking into the night. "Please! Open up! They need help now!" Moments later, the door flew open. Carter stood there, gray hair disheveled, coat thrown over his shoulders. His eyes sharpened the instant he saw me, an old woman clutching a blood-stained sack and a trembling pup. He asked no questions. He said only one thing. "Bring them in." Now, inside, the hallway blazed white. The door slammed behind me. The storm was locked outside. Inside, only the battle for life remained. Shadow whimpered in my arms, his eyes still fixed on the sack as if issuing a command. "Don't leave it. Save it." I nodded, whispering back with a near-broken voice, "I promise, Shadow. We won't let it die. Not tonight." The clinic lights poured down over the cold steel table, glinting off Snowdrop's white fur matted with blood. I stood close, my fingers digging into the edge of the table until my nails left marks. Shadow lay on a blanket, his eyes locked on the glass chamber, his breathing quick, rising and falling with every faint beep of the monitor. The wall clock crept toward midnight. The whole room was silent, save for the soft hiss of the ventilator and the wind screaming outside the window panes. I prayed the silence would last. But then the monitor flashed red. The beeping stretched into one long, flat line. "No rhythm!" a nurse shouted. Carter lunged forward. He yanked the breathing tube, started chest compressions with trembling but precise fingers. "Epinephrine, now!" he barked. I froze. My body fell into a black pit. The words from that note, useless. "Don't waste your time," flared in my mind. Was this the moment those words came true? Shadow lurched up, his tiny legs stumbling, launching himself toward the steel table. He howled, a raw, broken sound that tore the room apart, hoarse, desperate, slicing into my chest until it felt shattered. I caught him in my arms, whispering through tears. "Don't give up, Snowdrop. My son is gone, but I won't let you go too." Carter's voice cut sharply. "First shock!" The machine charged. Tick, tick, then slammed. Snowdrop's body jerked. The screen stayed flat. "Second!" Slam. Still nothing. My knees buckled. Shadow clawed at my sleeve, a tiny paw tearing a red scratch into my skin. His eyes drilled into mine, commanding, "Don't quit." "Third!" Carter pressed the paddles hard. The room held its breath, and then, beep, beep, a faint rhythm, weak as thread, but real. I cried out, choking, "Thank you, God." Carter gasped, sweat streaking down his face. He looked at me, voice ragged. "All right, for now. But listen, Margaret. He only has a chance if we operate. The wound is deep, and the infection is spreading. Without intervention, he'll be gone within hours." I clutched Shadow to my chest, my heart slamming against my ribs. Surgery? On such a tiny, broken body? The odds of survival were nearly zero. But without it, death was certain. I looked into Carter's eyes, heavy, sincere, the eyes of a man who had stood before death too many times. "I need your decision," he said quietly. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "Do it. Do everything you can. I won't let a life once called useless end like this." "He deserves a chance," Shadow whimpered, pressing his face into my hand. I stroked his head softly. "Do you hear me? We'll fight this together." Carter nodded, lowering his voice. "Take him to surgery. Scalpel ready, 6-0 sutures. Keep the body warm." They wheeled the steel table away, and I nearly followed, but a nurse stopped me. "You can't come in. We need space." I stood in the stark hallway, holding Shadow tight. He writhed, trying to chase after. I pressed him against my chest, both of us trembling as if we shared the same fear. The red surgery light blinked on. The doors shut. I sank onto the cold floor, spread my old wool scarf, and lay Shadow down. He refused to lie still, his eyes glued to the door, his little ears twitching at every sound within. I pressed my forehead to his, whispering like a prayer. "Shadow, you carried your friend here. Don't let him face that room alone. Send him your strength, and I'll be here for you both." The surgical machine ticked steadily. Tick, tick. Every sound hammered into my heart. Inside, Carter stitched one thread at a time, pulling life back. Outside, Shadow and I clung to Faith's fragile flame. And in that moment, I understood. The cruelty of the one who abandoned Snowdrop was not just meant to end a life. It was meant to erase the belief that these small lives have value. But as long as we stood here, as long as Shadow's wet eyes stayed fixed on that door, death had not yet won. The clinic door closed behind me, sealing the storm outside. In the stark white hallway, heavy with antiseptic, Dr. Carter motioned sharply. "On the steel table. Now." My hands shook as I obeyed, palms smeared with snow and mud, my chest tightening as I looked at Snowdrop, the little white rabbit, lying limp. His fur was matted with blood, his eyes half shut, his breath almost gone. Carter leaned in, his gaze sharp as a scalpel. "Deep laceration along the lower body. Severe blood loss. body temperature collapsing. He snapped his head up. Oxygen, heat pads, prep fluids. The nurses moved instantly. I held Shadow close. His tiny body quaked, teeth chattering, but his eyes stayed fixed on Snowdrop. He squirmed, trying to leap to the table. I whispered, holding him back. Easy. The doctor's trying to save your friend. Trust me. The first sound came. Beep, beep, from the monitor. Weak, scattered, like a thread about to break. My heart sank with every note. Carter pressed his stethoscope to Snowdrop's chest, his brows furrowed. Very weak pulse. But it's there. His voice hardened. We're not giving up. A nurse reached to toss away the sack, but I noticed something taped inside. I pulled it back. A small plastic bag, sealed with tape, held a crumpled scrap of paper. The black marker ink was smeared from damp. Useless. Don't waste your time. I froze. My heart clenched, my hands shook, tears spilling. Who could write this about such a fragile little life? I whispered. Carter glanced at it, lips pressed tight. He didn't speak, only clenched his gloved fists, fury burning in his eyes. I looked at Shadow. He looked at the note, then back at Snowdrop, his eyes glistening with silent grief. My voice broke. Do you see? They called him useless. But you carried him here. You knew his worth when no one else did. The monitor stuttered. Beep. Silence. My breath caught. Pulse is dropping, a nurse cried. Carter barked. More oxygen. Heat faster. Keep circulation moving. I couldn't take it. I set Shadow on the edge of the steel table. He trembled, but the moment he touched Snowdrop, he stretched forward, his tiny paw pressing against the rabbit's bloodied fur. The monitor beeped again. My mouth fell open, tears streaming. Carter's eyes lit. Keep him there! Don't separate them. Shadow pressed closer, nestling his nose against his friend. Snowdrop flinched, then his chest rose, labored but stronger. Through tears I whispered, See? He's not useless. He's alive, and he wants to stay. For 10 long minutes, the room held its breath. Only the halting monitor, the rustle of heated blankets, and the pounding of my heart filled the silence. Carter worked steadily, treating the wound, running fluids, massaging circulation. But I knew. It wasn't just medicine holding Snowdrop back from the edge. It was Shadow's unyielding eyes, his tiny paw refusing to let go. At last, the monitor steadied. Beep, 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 stronger now. Carter exhaled, stripped off his gloves, and wiped sweat from his brow. Out of immediate danger, for now. Still fragile. The next hours will decide I hugged Shadow tight, kissed his soaked head. You did what no one else would. You refused to give up. He whimpered softly, his brown eyes glowing with something far beyond human comprehension, unconditional love. I looked at Carter. He gave a quiet nod, and in that cold, white room, I knew the battle had only begun. But I had seen something the cruel world outside would never understand. In the heart of darkness, light can still burn bright from the soul of a puppy. The red light above the surgery door still glowed, casting its cold shine down the stark white hallway. I sat on the floor, clutching Shadow in my arms. He hadn't closed his eyes once, his wet brown gaze fixed on the door, his tiny ears perked as if straining to hear every heartbeat of his friend inside. The sound of scalpels and metal clamps echoed out in dry, steady rhythms. I caught Carter's low voice through the door. The tear is deeper than I thought. Clotted blood, signs of infection. More gauze. Quickly sweat ran down my spine even though the corridor was freezing. I leaned my head against the wall, and memories crashed over me. The night I sat outside an emergency room waiting for news of my son. When the doors opened, they only shook their heads. I thought I had lost forever the ability to believe in miracles. Yet here I was again, before another door, with the same terror. Only this time, I wasn't alone. Shadow pressed into my chest, his breath ragged, as if trying to carry the pain with me. A shrill flatline pierced the hall. The door cracked open and a nurse bolted out. "Heart stopped again." "We're shocked. Pray we can bring him back." The door slammed shut, leaving me frozen in the hallway. Shadow howled, a raw, broken sound that tore straight through me. I bent over him, pressing his head to my shoulder. "Please, please, don't let me lose anyone else." Not again. Inside, I heard Carter's shout, "Clear!" The electric jolt cracked through the air. I held my breath. 1 second, 2, silence. Then, beep, beep, faint but steady. I broke down, hugging Shadow tight. "He's alive, little one." He's still alive. The surgery dragged on endlessly. All I caught were fragments of tense commands. "Suture that. Keep the drain. More warm fluids." Each word was like a rope pulling me out of the pit. I told myself I had to believe, not just in Carter, but in the fierce love blazing in Shadow's eyes. At last, the red light went dark. Carter pushed through the door, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes glimmered. We closed the wound, cleared the clot. He's weak, very weak, but he has a chance. My knees nearly gave out. Shadow wriggled from my arms, rushing to sniff Carter's coat as if demanding proof Snowdrop was still alive. Carter knelt and stroked his head gently. "He's still here, little one. But he'll need time to fight his way back." They placed Snowdrop in a small incubator, wrapped in heated blankets, hooked up to fluids and oxygen. I stepped closer, trembling as I watched his chest rise, faint but real. Shadow pressed his nose against the glass, whimpering like a prayer. I opened the hatch just enough for his tiny paw to slip inside and touch the white fur. Snowdrop twitched, his lips quivering. I swear, at that moment, the monitor's rhythm climbed a notch. Carter paused, then allowed himself the faintest smile. "Don't separate them. He needs that friend more than anything." That night, I never left the room. I laid a blanket on the floor beside the incubator, and Shadow curled against me. Neither of us dared to close our eyes. The dim yellow light washed over Snowdrop, his breath still shallow, sometimes quick, sometimes halting, dangling on the edge between two worlds. Around 3 a.m, the monitor dipped. My heart seized. I shot to my feet as Carter rushed in. He checked quickly, then turned to me. "Possible shock response. We need to raise his body temperature more and monitor him closely." I almost broke down. "Please, don't give up on him." Carter's voice cut firm. "We're not giving up." "But you must hold faith too." Shadow placed his paw on my hand, his eyes glowing steadily. I drew a breath, whispered to him as much as to myself, "We'll stay. To the very last breath, even if hope is a thread." And then, like a fragile miracle, the monitor returned to rhythm. Stronger. Carter nodded, his eyes bloodshot but bright. "He's through the crisis." At least this one I collapsed back down, tears mingling with Shadow's warm breath. Tonight, the darkness tried to claim a life, but the love of a little puppy had held it back. By the next morning, golden light streamed through the clinic's windows, falling across Snowdrop's tiny body inside the warming chamber. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. Carter told me to go home and rest. But how could I leave when that fragile life still hovered on the edge? Shadow curled up against the glass, his brown eyes bloodshot but unblinking. He refused food, only licking a few drops of water from my hand before turning back to watch Snowdrop again. I laid my palm on his head and whispered, "He's still here, little one. You need to keep your strength if you're going to walk beside him." He whimpered softly, as if to say, "I won't look away." Near noon, Snowdrop stirred. At first, just a twitch of the nose, then the faint flutter of his eyelids. I held my breath, my heart stopping. Carter hurried over, eyes fixed. "Come on now. Show me you want to come back." And then, those half-closed eyes glimmered with the faintest light. Tears broke free, my hand covering my mouth so I wouldn't wake him. Shadow let out a quivering whine, his tail wagging so hard he nearly toppled over. Snowdrop couldn't move much yet. Carter explained, "His muscles are wasted from the cold. He'll need time to regain strength. But opening his eyes, that's a milestone." I nodded, tears streaming. To me, that flicker was already a miracle. That afternoon, we tried a drop of warm, diluted milk. I cradled his head while Carter held a small syringe to his lips. His tongue flicked weakly, trembling, then swallowed. I choked out, "Oh God, he wants to live." Shadow leapt, circling the chair, then rushed back to lick my hand, desperate to share the joy. On the third day after surgery, Carter was allowed a short exercise outside the warming chamber. I spread a soft blanket on the floor. Placing Snowdrop down, I nearly stopped breathing. His thin legs trembled, his body wavering. He collapsed on the very first step. "It's all right. Try again," Carter encouraged. Shadow stepped forward, standing right in front of him, then looked back. He gave a sharp little bark, tail wagging. Snowdrop lifted his head, cloudy eyes still seeking that tiny figure. He pushed up again, holding himself on his front legs. His body shook like a leaf, but then another step. Collapse. Then up again. I dropped to my knees, tears pouring as I watched Shadow gently nudge his friend's shoulder before stepping back to wait. And Snowdrop managed 2 more steps before crumpling, exhausted but unwilling to surrender. Carter stood with his arms crossed, and for once, I saw his eyes soften. He murmured, "That strength, it comes from love. No science can replace it." That evening, I took them both home to my small house that had long been shared only with 2 strays, Misty and Cole. I laid Snowdrop in a cloth-woven basket. Shadow instantly curled against him. Misty crept near, fur bristling with suspicion, but minutes later, when Snowdrop whimpered weakly, the cat bent down and licked his forehead. I sat watching, my hand trembling against my chest. For years, I had lived with silence and loss, but now, in this house, there was a fragile but fierce rhythm of life. That night, I pulled a chair beside the basket. Shadow kept guard on one side, Misty and Cole curled close on the other. I looked at all 4 of them, and for the first time since losing my husband and son, a warmth surged through me I thought I'd never feel again. I whispered through tears spilling onto my hands, "Lord, thank you for bringing them to me. I understand now. Love is the only thing that keeps us alive." Snowdrop shifted, still breathing heavy but steadier. Shadow laid his paw across his friend's back, closed his eyes, and finally surrendered to sleep after so many wakeful nights. I leaned back against the chair, letting the tears fall. The room was silent, except for my own heartbeat, steadying itself against the fragile breaths of those small lives. And in that moment I knew life had given me another chance, not only to save Snowdrop, but to save my own heart. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The lawn in front of my porch, once buried under dead leaves, now echoed with tiny footsteps. Snowdrop, bearing the long scar along his side, had learned to stand. He was still slow, his back legs sometimes trembling, but every step he took was a living miracle. Shadow circled him, tail wagging wildly, stopping now and then to look at his friend as if to say, "Keep going. You can do it." I sat on my old wooden chair, a mug of hot tea in my hands, my eyes blurred with tears. The sight carried me back to when my son was little, learning to walk in our yard. When he stumbled, my husband lifted him up. Now those memories overlapped. Snowdrop struggling to find his footing under Shadow's patient watch. I whispered softly, "George, Daniel, if you were here, you'd be smiling." The two cats, Misty and Cole, once wary, had become silent guardians. Misty often lay beside Snowdrop, quietly licking his ears. Cole perched at the window, keeping watch over the yard. I had never seen such harmony, cat, dog, and rabbit. Three creatures that should have had nothing in common are now a family. One morning, Snowdrop was strong enough to run a few steps. I was sweeping the porch when I heard the rustle of small feet on the grass. Shadow chased ahead, Snowdrop limping after him. And then, suddenly, he leapt. Just a short hop, but enough to stop me in my tracks. Shadow barked in triumph, and I dropped the broom, covering my face as tears poured down. They weren't tears of grief anymore. There were tears of gratitude. That afternoon, I took Snowdrop and Shadow back to Carter's clinic for a checkup. When he saw Snowdrop wobble down the hallway, Carter froze. "I never thought he'd be walking this soon," he said hoarsely. My eyes brimmed as I answered, "He didn't give up. And because of you, you didn't give up either." Carter knelt, resting a hand on Shadow's head. "And this little fellow, without him, we wouldn't even have had a chance." My chest tightened at the sight. I knew then, science had stitched Snowdrop back together, but it was Shadow's unwavering love that had beaten death. Weeks later, Snowdrop was well enough to venture into the yard, sniffing the spring air. The Montana sky stretched blue and endless, sunlight spilling gold across the grass. I set out food, and the four little souls gathered around, while I sat watching, my once empty house now brimming with life. That evening, I lit the small lamp in the living room. Shadow rested his head on my lap. Snowdrop curled at my side, while Misty and Cole nestled into the rug. I spoke softly, as though to the ones I had lost. "George, Daniel, because of these little lives, my heart is stitched together again. I no longer live just to remember. I live to love again. Sometimes I wonder, why did a frail little puppy, abandoned on a snowy night, find my door? Was it mere chance? Or a gift from above? A chance to remind me that love still exists, even when we believe we've lost everything?" The night was quiet. Snowdrop breathed steadily. Shadow's paws twitched in a dream. I placed my hand over my chest and felt a heart that no longer weighed so heavily. Deep inside, I knew it wasn't me who saved them. They had saved me. A widow, a mother without her son, once drowning in solitude. If anyone asked me what lesson I've learned, I'd say this: love doesn't need the same species, the same language, or the same fate. It only needs a heart that refuses to give up. Shadow didn't give up on Snowdrop, and because of that, I learned not to give up on life. I lifted my eyes to the stars and whispered, "Thank you." Not just to God, but to the little puppy who knocked on my door that winter night, to the rabbit once branded useless, to the 2 stray cats who found a home here. Thank you for reminding me that even in a cruel world, miracles still exist, if only we open our hearts to see them. And when Snowdrop shifted in his sleep, pressing against Shadow, I knew The five of us, creatures once scattered and lost, had become a family. And if you are still here, with your heart trembling like mine, then I believe you feel what I feel. Sometimes it is the smallest abandoned lives that teach us what unconditional love truly means. Have you ever saved a dog's life? Have you ever held a trembling body in your arms, believing it might slip away, only to see it open its eyes and trust you? If you have, please share your story in the comments. Because each story is a small flame, and together, those flames can push back the darkness of neglect. Let us make sure no dog is left abandoned in the cold, no soul left to fade away in silence. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe, not just to watch another video, but to become part of a family that rescues, that shares, that loves. Thank you from the depths of my heart, and thank you for not looking away.